started, we were able to spend some time doing some outreach over the past few weeks to talk with a variety of alumni, and we really wanted to be able to make sure that, given the urgency and the challenges ahead, we wanted to also make sure we brought in some seasoned veterans that have already lived through a number of economic cycles and challenges in their own professional careers. But we also wanted to make sure we brought in a younger perspective. So we've tried to bring in 4 distinguished alums that have been able to make their mark and have a lot to say about what they've been working on, as well as their path to where they are today. So we have 4. We want to introduce each of them. This is a little long, but they are very distinguished, so I want to make sure I give them their due. And for some of you who have not met, it's a good introduction to some of the work that they've been engaged in. We're joined by Julia Gamolina, Bachelor of Architecture 2011. She was, or is it 2012?
It's 2013.
2013. Oh. We were together in the fall of 2011.
11,
Sorry.
yeah.
I have like this thing where I know where you are in my world, but obviously when you graduated, it's usually like a year afterwards. So, but she's a director of strategy at Trahan Architects, a global architectural firm rooted in New Orleans and New York, where she focuses on new business, digital communications, and brand development. You probably know Julia more for the recent work because she's the founder and editorial director of MadameArchitect.org, an online publication about, by, and for women that advance the practices of architecture. To date, Julia has interviewed over 125 architects and designers, as well as CEOs, publicists, journalists, business strategists, and more. Her writing has also been featured in Fast Company, Metropolis, Architizer, and the Architect's Newspaper, to name just a few. In 2019, Julia received the special citation from the AIA New York chapter for her work with Madame Architect and was named one of professional women in construction's 20 under 40. She has served on juries in the 2019 World Architectural Festival and the DNA Paris Design Awards, and has also held various speaking engagements at Harvard, Columbia, Yale, UPenn, etc. Julia clearly is dedicated to the built environment and the visibility and advancement of women who work in it. Our next guest is DeVon Prioleau. Close? Prioleau? There we go. We're working on it. Bachelor of Architecture 05, is a director of Ferzan, or is it Ferzan?
Ferzan.
Ferzan. Company, an active program and project leadership firm providing consultant services to real estate and both public and private investors, developers, owners, tenants, and end users. He is also managing principal at Prioleau Development Group, a boutique real estate advisory company. DeVon combines his two areas of passion, the formal study of architecture and real estate development, which he provides strategic planning, design, construction, and management services for his clients and owners, both domestically and internationally. In addition to his BArch degree, he went on to Harvard to get his master's in science and real estate development, and he is also LEED AP accredited, and also holds a real estate brokerage license in New York State, and is also MBE certified. I have no idea how you've done all this in such a short period of time. It's exhausting just to say it. And of course, he also serves on a number of executive boards for the Council on Urban Real Estate, also known as CURE, and the Arts and Business Council of New York, ABC-NY. We're also joined by Mark Hill, AIA, also a leader in NOMA, and a founding partner and director of architecture. In 2015, he co-founded the Studio H Architecture Planning Environments, also known as SHAPE, with offices in New York and Atlanta. Prior to forming SHAPE, Mark was part of the senior management team for the design of the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. Prior to that, Mark held senior positions at Gwathmey Siegel and Associates, for 13 years, where they won multiple design awards. And then prior to that, worked for IM Pay and Partners, today Paycobb Freed and Partners, where he collaborated on several award-winning cultural and institutional projects. Mark is also a New York City native, so particularly close to my heart. So Mark, thanks for being here. Really excited to have you. He is also one of our leaders on the Dean's Advisory Council and has been an active member since its inception. So again, Mark, thank you for all that you do. And of course, we're joined by the esteemed Dan Kaplan, fellow in the American Institute of Architects and a senior partner at FX Collaborative, and serves both in his design leadership capacity on the firm's leading and most complex and award-winning urban buildings. Of course, Dan's work is signature, especially in Midtown. You get into Times Square, but of course the firm's reach is well beyond New York City, and is known for his high performance buildings, his urban design, as well as his approach to building and design. We were fortunate also that he was an L. Michael Goldsmith lecturer a few years ago, and if you want to see it, it's a great presentation where Dan really reveals his design perspective. So we're really happy to have Dan here. And I did mention that Dan is a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, which took place, was that 2 years ago, Dan?
I think it was like Julia's, like 4 years ago.
Jeez,
It's
that's what happens when I leave this place for 3 months. My brain falls apart.
It's 2 years in Balder years.
There we go.
4 years in people years.
So that's our group, and of course we do want to expand on some of our core themes this evening, which I'm going to let our esteemed guests talk a little bit more about. But certainly the idea of broadening your search, thinking more intensively on some of the things that might be near-term opportunities. They may not be your absolute desire coming out of Cornell, but given today's conditions, we are really going to be having to think broadly, creatively, and expanding our reach in all ways, as we call broaden the lens, as we go forward. So I think I'd like to open up a question for the whole group. And that would be, what advice would you give to a young professional entering today's job market? Okay, I'm going to let each of you kind of wrestle with that, because each of you have different kind of terrain that you're working in, and certainly DeVon, you've got also a whole nother perspective as it relates to construction, real estate, consultancy. So why don't we start off, Julia? Since I introduced you first, let me let you take the mic.
Sure. Great question. I mean, there's sort of two categories to this. The first is to be really open in where you're drawing your net and where you're searching. And I'll expand on that in a second. And I think the second point is that you should be showcasing all of your skills, not just your design skills, but also, you know, if you ran a student chapter of something and, you know, wrote things, you should include that in your application. If you manage the social media account and website for another organization, like, you can lay that out nicely and showcase that kind of work too in your portfolio. And so the reason for that, I'll start here, is, you know, I think a lot of firms, especially the smaller firms, are going to be looking for, you know, one person that they're bringing on to do many things, which will, you know, save them from hiring multiple people. You know, they can just hire one that's kind of a jack of all trades. And I've certainly been in that position at smaller firms. And so the more your design work, I mean, has to be, you know, spend some time on your portfolio and make sure that you're presenting everything in the best way, and that, you know, the images are nice and big. A lot of people scroll on their phones now, I've noticed, when reviewing PDFs and portfolios. But in addition to that, I just think any skills you can tap in that show holistically who you are and what you can bring to the firm, and maybe you'll be really good to pitch in on proposal submissions because you have an eye for layout, or a really great attention to detail, or because you're an amazing writer. Like, all of that works to your advantage. And I think more and more, because of the situation, but just in general with how interconnected everything is, and how, you know, people are talking about careers no longer being ladders, but rather jungle gyms. I think just the more skills you can prepare yourself with, the more flexible you can be and find opportunities for. And then in terms of just broadening your reach or where you're applying, I would really let go of the notion of the dream firm right now. I know that can be really scary. And you've worked so hard for 5 years and wanted a certain goal, wanted to work at a certain firm, knew what you wanted, and maybe that's not possible right now. But I will say any experience you have, even if you're working like as a barista or something, you're learning customer relationships, right? You're learning like client management. It's all very cumulative. And no matter what job you get next, if it's in the field, but maybe not quite the focus that you want to have, or maybe it's outside of the field, you will bring all of that into your architectural career. And careers are long. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for pivot points. I've had many. I started out working as a designer for about 4 years, then pivoted to doing communications and marketing, and then worked with Dan at FX Collaborative doing business development, and all of that kind of now ties into strategy. So a lot of evolution there, and obviously with Madam Architect too. That's a whole other thing I'll talk about later. But yeah, your first job will not be your last job. I think my first job out of school was an internship, just because I really needed, I think I started working the day after I graduated because I needed the salary, frankly, and also the visa status. And it certainly was not my last job. So yeah, just broaden your reach and showcase as many of your skills as you can.
Great, great. DeVon, do you want to jump in next?
Yeah, no, I'd certainly like to echo a lot of Julia's original sentiments, and as it relates specifically to construction and perhaps kind of the post-COVID-19 industry career look. I think remaining searching opportunities by market sector and exploring different opportunities that way is a good way to start. I think evaluating long-term experience versus short-term financial benefits is something that I think people should consider, especially young graduates. It's not always about the big bucks. Sometimes it's about putting in the grind and rolling up your sleeves and getting the hard work done. I can tell you, it's a lot easier to do it on your earlier years than to do it later. So I would encourage you guys to go ahead and put that work in right out of school. Careers that I'm hearing that are kind of on the verge of really taking off, and things that you guys might want to further explore, things like scheduling, things like estimating, claims assessments. These are all different industries, and we'll talk about it a bit further. Things that I think that you can get into outside of just traditional architecture, or a bit of a spin as it relates to architecture. Also, I think a multifaceted and flexible professional. As Julia mentioned, you have to have more than one skill set. You have to be very flexible, a jack of many trades, and really know how to adapt in kind of a sink or swim corporate environment. You are going to be tested, usually at your limits, and usually, what your superiors want to see is how you perform in times of adversity. And this right now, the past 3 months for us all has been a time of adversity. So things like that is what you want to focus on. Obviously, just getting to the quick, I think adding technology and innovation to your resumes is really important. Obviously there's an older generation out there that's usually at the forefront of many of the CEO and C-suites. And they may not be as privy to some of the things that are going on now. So you guys, the younger crowd, you guys are the experts. Tell us what are you doing? What are you seeing? What technologies are you using? How are you using them? How are you being more efficient? If you think using your AutoCAD is better than me pulling out my T-square and Drafter, show me why. And tell me why that's more efficient, and help me and show me how you can be more productive, et cetera, et cetera. These are just, totally random examples I'm giving, but, and able to show efficiency and able to show your worth and how you can contribute to the bottom line is key. And I'll leave it there for now.
Okay. Hey, Mark, I'll let you go.
Sure. One of the things that DeVon, you had mentioned in a previous conversation is your work right out of school with Spike Lee doing set design. I thought that was a really good thing to share with the people, that it's not just about architecture, but it's about what are we trained to do. One of the things that the skill set that you come out of this school with is problem solving. And an architect is really, if you distill it down, a glorified problem solver. And you can, with the training that you have, with the vision, with the ability to see things that other people can't see, to understand problems, you know, three-dimensional problems that other people can't see. There are so many avenues for those skill sets. And they come in the form of the movie industry, which is not down right now. And even though they're showing, you know, you're seeing things on TV streaming, they're building those sets somewhere. They're filming those movies somewhere. So you can definitely present your credentials in that area. One of the things that I have the privilege of doing is my company right now, the main bulk of my company is based in Atlanta. And so my partner is a professor at Georgia Tech. So we have a streamline of Georgia Tech students that come through our office. And we recently actually hired 2 of our summer interns to be full-time with us. Now, what are the things that we're looking for? So one of the things that when I sit down with a new graduate, I'm looking for excitement about the profession. Now, in this case, we're talking about alternate professions, so just transfer that. Excitement about whatever it is that you're looking to do. I'm looking for that person to be teachable, because as much as you think you know, honestly, you don't know anything yet. So there's a whole profession ahead of you. So you really have to be willing to say to yourself, look, I'm going to learn from whoever it is or wherever it is I'm going, and you have to be teachable. That means that when somebody comes to you and say, hey, why don't you try doing it this way? Do it their way first before doing it your way. That's always the biggest problem that we see, is that, well, I direct you to do something and then you're doing it your way first and trying to convince me. Do it their way first and then show them why your way might be better. But you need to do it in a way that you can speak to the other generation, because as DeVon said, the other generation is different than yours. And so you need to have that communication. So there are so many skill sets that you can use in a different way. There's visionary, there's detailing that you've learned from school, there's public speaking and being able to present your projects. There's just leadership and being able to lead maybe you had a joint team in your studio, or maybe you were just leading your own project, but there's leadership there. And so there's so many creative avenues. There's graphic design. And that graphic design can be in so many places. You can go into the fashion industry, and there's graphic design in every single industry that's needed. So there's even set design in the fashion industry. So there's just so many areas. There's merchandising in retail. And what that means is being able to look at the windows and be able to design the windows, window design. So there's all of these things that you can put your skill set to use prior to, I mean, let's say that you have your mindset, I want to be an architect someday. You could still be an architect, but during these COVID times, we have to do what's needed to be able to survive. And during that survival time, that doesn't mean you're just wasting your time. It means you're growing. You are growing as a person, you're growing as a designer, you're growing with visually, you're growing. And then of course, this is a great time to be able to learn things online. There's so many, now that everybody's gone digital, there are so many online opportunities to be able to learn and to grow as a designer, as an individual. And one of the things that I really want to stress, and this goes to a story that I experienced when I first came out of school, is confidence in what you have learned at Cornell. Do not underestimate the power of the name of this school, nor underestimate the power of what you have learned. One of the things I remember, I first graduated, I took some time to do my portfolio over so that I could, be the best representation. As a minority, I knew already I was disadvantaged because it was a majority profession at that time, and it was difficult to break through that. But guess what? I wasn't focused on the fact that I was a minority. I was focused on the fact that I had a Cornell degree. And I knew that I was put in a position that was going to be in a better place than other people were going to be. And so I got my first job, and I'll be honest with you, I was completely disillusioned. For the first 4 years, I said, nothing I was taught is what this firm is doing. I figured, okay, must be that I was just taught theory. This is reality, and I just have to deal with it. A friend of mine encouraged me to apply to I.M. Pei's office. I said, okay, I loved Pei's work. I always enjoyed that whole, geometry, the iconic buildings. I thought it was amazing. And so I applied, and I got the job because of the strength of my portfolio, the strength of what I was doing, the technology that we just spoke about, learning, understanding technology and how to work it together. And I remember walking into the elevator, and Mr. Pei was standing there in the elevator. And I walked over to him and I said, Mr. Pei, I just want you to know that I've just joined your firm. He said, oh, okay. What school? I said, Cornell. He goes, good school. That was the extent of my conversation with Mr. Pei for weeks. But notice the first question he asked me, what school? Because that is the strength of what you have right now. You have a degree from one of the most powerful universities on the planet, and you can use that in so many different ways. I'll let other people speak now. That was my one story. I have more, but Dan, you go ahead. Or sorry, Kendra.
Yeah, Dan, go ahead.
Well, that was all. That's three very, very hard acts to follow.
Oh, come on, you know you got stuff.
Well, I've heard that Pei story before. It's quite good, but it's great every time. I would say, look, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know. It's a very, very, very difficult environment out there right now. And, but, if you're going to do the traditional architecture route, let's say, and you want to find a work in a firm, I mean, it's very similar to what we face, you'll face throughout your career. It's just now, it's like you started learning how to ski, and then instead of like progressing from like, the green to the blue to the black, someone just dumped you on the top of a hill with, off a helicopter, and you're like all in powder for down the side of a mountain. So it's just, you're getting a sort of a real education. But I would say that it's no different than, what I have to do every day, and anybody else, is like, you have to find where the opportunities are. And what I always say is, and it's not my line, it's a famous, I forget the film, it's like, you have to follow the money. If you want to figure out where to get work, whether I do it for my firm, and where you're trying to find where there are people actually spending money on building buildings or commissioning planning studies, you got to figure out where the money's coming from and who's spending money. So I think there's a few areas that Mark and DeVon and Julia already gave you a whole bunch of areas that people are spending money on design, design skills, and outside of maybe let's say the more traditional realm. But if I were looking for a job right now, I just got out of school, I would be looking for smaller firms that do high-end homes in the Hamptons, or in Napa or wherever, that for better or for worse, probably politically for much worse, we still live in a age of very, very extreme wealth disparity. But those people at the top like to spend a lot of money on houses. And my first job out of school, after I lived in Europe for a while and everything else like that, was I had my experience. I wanted to work for Todd and Billy, Williamson, and I went in and I presented my portfolio, and they said, "Oh, Cornell, that's nice." And then they said, "Sorry, we're not hiring." And then I was totally deflated, because that's exactly where I wanted to work. But I found a work at a firm called Cyrus Coombs Architects, which was about 3 or 4 blocks away, and they also did residential work on the Upper West Side. And lo and behold, a year later, I was doing Vera Wong's apartment, and she's she turned out to be the famous dress designer, and she came from a very wealthy family. And I have to tell you that it was the best training I ever received. I had to design Vera's bathroom on Park Avenue 4 times. And after I did that, I went to work at Fox and Fowl at the time, and I could design any office building or any core or anything else like that, because I had, Vera's bathroom was the microcosm of every complicated design project I ever had. So that's number one. So you got to just sort of be opportunistic, follow the money, whether it's locale, where, size of firm. Don't turn your nose up at a small firm. I think small firms are the best places to learn. you learn everything. As Julia said, you get out of school, you do a vast variety of things, and you really see how practice works. The second thing I would say is, and I think Mark and DeVon said, is like, be curious. You know, there is no, because of your architectural training and, you know, all those great professors that you had, and you know, Andrew and everybody, you know, you can look at any task and any issue and just bring so much more to it. So read any piece of literature, any nonfiction, any webinar, you can sort of push, you know, pull the pieces together, and there's so much. So I would say, you know, one of the great things you learn how to do is learn how to learn. And I would take this time, your whole professional career. When I got out of school, I was very lost because I really loved it so much, and the whole studio environment and everything else like that. And then you realize you have to self-start on that and continue. And there is just so much out there between the Architectural League, the AIA. You guys know more than I do. I mean, there's just so much. Just follow Bob's weekly newsletter. Finally, the other two more little things, and I'll shut up. One is, I think it's so important to show up. You know, now the discredited Woody Allen said, you know, 99% of success is just showing up on the set. I really think it's so important just to be present. Go to as many of these things as possible. You know, just reach out to people, keep at it, you know, persistence, just keep showing up, be in the mix. You know, you're in a marathon, and, you know, you just are like, got off the finished, you know, starting line. So you know, it's just, you got to keep showing up early and often. And the last thing I would say is, I know it's like it seems very bleak now, but you have to stay optimistic. It is a great time to be an architect. It really is. I have to say, I was just on a call. I'm on the Regional Plan Association, and, you know, every issue that's going to be facing cities, right, and that are facing cities, you know, we are in the center of the solutions. And I know, unless we're going to go totally dystopia, which we're not, and you know, turn into Mad Max, which we're not, there's going to be money to do big work. And whether it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's going to be sooner than 5 years from now. So I think it's just a matter of staying optimistic and staying in the mix and continuing to keep it going, because I think there's just so much on the horizon. And at every phase, you got to look at what the potentials are. But I have to tell you, over my career, I've just seen the role of the architect and the role of design increase in centrality and importance. And I see not only no backing down of that curve, I just see an acceleration as we get into solving some really, really tough societal problems.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you all. I think it really leads also into some important questions about where we are today in terms of our skill sets. And a couple of questions have come in from the students that really explore this idea of how do we position ourselves in the marketplace, and does today's challenge of COVID-19 maybe change the dynamic on some of the skill sets that we would need to present, say, in an interview? For example, the questioner says, what are some of the skill sets you've seen become more necessary than ever during remote working? In addition, ways that you've adjusted your team's workflow for enhanced collaboration, more effectively working with individual autonomy to be able to move things forward.
Great to meet all of you virtually. It's really cool.
Oh, I think we got another line coming.
How are you doing?
Is anyone hearing that? Okay. So let me throw that out to the group, just about this dynamic of the changing skill sets. I know that a number of recent graduates have all been able to interview remotely, and of course that's challenging. But then I know of a few students have also been given jobs and have also had to start a new career remotely at a firm that they could not even walk in the door. So again, maybe there's a nuance that may be important that demonstrates that kind of capability in terms of maturity, communications, ability to really navigate Zoom or WebEx, whatever it may be. So Julia, let me throw that out to you, because I know you're working remotely all the time doing all kinds of communications.
That's, as soon as you started to ask the question of what skills are necessary, I was going to say, communication is the main one. There was one time when I had a mentor very early on, and I met her at her office for like an hour once a month. And I wrote an email to a client that I wanted her feedback on. So I printed out this email and I went to her and I was like, can you mark this up for me and tell me how you would write it? And to this day, she says, Julia, that's when I knew that you're a writer, and maybe not necessarily a drafter or a designer, because I wasn't bringing her a drawing set to mark up to be like, can you tell me what I can improve in this drawing? I was bringing her an email. But certainly that's huge. I mean, being really organized and how you put your thoughts into words, what you bold, what you make a list, what's a paragraph, what's a sentence, you know what I mean? I mean, all of that is very important. All of these skills, though, you'll learn. I mean, the more you use Zoom, the more you'll be better at it and stuff. And the one thing I also want to say, communication skills are really important. I just think, at this time also now, at least for me, has allowed a little bit for more deep work possibilities. You can just, you're not in an open plan anymore, which to be honest, open plan was never really for me. I was the kind of student in both high school and college where I needed to be in a silent room with my door closed and classical music or ocean waves as white noise in the background. And so in some ways I've really taken advantage of that with this period. It used to be that, any deep work I did had to be first thing in the morning before coming into the office, or, later in the evening. And now there are pockets of time in the middle of the day that I can tap into and do that kind of thing. So, take advantage of that, of times where you're most productive. And that should be able to help. The other thing I want to say is be really true to yourself. I know that's really trite, but you can't try and be someone else, and you can't try to have strengths that maybe, you can definitely develop skills and develop strengths, but the things that are innate to you and that you already have practiced a lot and that you like, now is also the time to just continue to hone in on those. And that's, in terms of positioning yourself in the market right now, with so many applicants coming in, the best thing you can do is just really, really showcase what it is that you really stand out for, what makes you unlike anyone else. And again, like I said, obviously all of you guys have a wonderful design portfolio and, have similar projects, have similar professors, but the way you approach your projects, why you decided to design what you did, the organizations that you're a part of in school, the internships you had, the part-time jobs you had, that's all different, where you come from. For example, for me, I immigrated twice, and my two internships during school were both abroad, one in Brazil and one in Vienna. And so when I was applying to my first jobs, I really capitalized on that. I said, I have this global kind of experience. I've had to communicate in German and had to translate websites from German to English. So anything like that sets you apart. This is also a really good time to journal a lot and kind of make, work through a lot of your thoughts in writing, which I highly recommend. I did a lot of that early in my career, and I'm doing a lot of that now too. But yeah, it's a really good time to really get internal and be true to yourself and realize, what it is you want to do and what you are strong in and what you can't live without. So I highly encourage you to do some of that, personal reflection now too.
Okay. DeVon, thoughts on that? Just the nature of how we're working more remotely, and any skills that you see that are different than maybe what we would normally think of going into the job market. Are you working differently?
Not so much myself. Fortunately, we've been able to kind of remain fluid and remote as a result. Right now, maybe once a week I need to go in for a particular project matter, but for the most part, everything can be done remotely. And I think, that is changing, obviously, how we interact with each other, obviously, as it relates to academia. I know myself being a part-time 7th grade teacher and 1st grade teacher over the past 3 months, that has really changed how things are operating. And certainly, I don't think there will be much of a change in September. My fiance is in administration, and what we're hearing is this may last until January. And so, being adaptable is very important. But there are, some tips to kind of shaping your career roadmap, and I find that there are practical steps that you take to refine your career goals and create a professional roadmap. I would encourage, some of the younger guys and gals that are on the phone here to follow these several steps. And I wrote down a couple here. If I could go. First is kind of to identify your goals and a plan, a career ladder, and the steps needed to achieve those goals. So obviously, you want to outline what it is that you're looking to achieve. First, as Julia mentioned, usually journaling, writing that down. Usually once you get it out of your head and onto paper, you can manifest those things a lot better. Secondly, I would conduct the needs assessments to determine if your goal is marketable or palatable. And if not, perhaps reevaluating your intended goals. Sometimes those goals that we seek for ourselves are not the right ones at first. And being upfront and honest about that, and perhaps going back to recraft those a little bit is what needs to be done. I think assessing your skill sets that will make your long-term goals achievable is also important. If you are missing certain skills or experience in a certain area, identify that and determine the best way to acquire that skill set. And that can be, taking some classes online. That could be the University of YouTube, which I know all you millennials, you guys use, figure it out. I can't tell you how much of an asset I learned from my bosses on just how to be resourceful. If you don't know how to get the answer, find out how to get the answer. It's really not that difficult. Being resourceful is key and will help any employer in any state. 4, I would say talk to potential employers and determine what they are looking for. The quickest way to get a job and to be an asset to somebody is to ask them what they need help with. What do you need? How can I help you? That's the quickest way I find to get a job. 5, create a communications outreach plan to target key employers that have projects. So for example, I know we hate it, but creating Excel spreadsheets, ladies and gentlemen, who did I speak to? Who am I speaking to next week? Who am I speaking to next month? And what did they say? Was the response, receptive, or was it not? I can cancel them off the list, or I can call them back in 2 weeks. But, journaling that, writing that down, getting an understanding of who you spoke to, when you spoke to, what those initial discussions and conversations were, that'll definitely line you up and ultimately it's going to help you build a database of numbers and emails and contacts that you absolutely want. I've learned an old saying from my grandfather, your network determines your net worth. And I'll say it again. Yeah. Your network determines your net worth. I truly believe that the more people you know, the more people you associate yourself with, like-minded, positive individuals, the better you'll be. Now, if you're dealing with losers, if your circle of friends are losers, you're losers. Now, it's about being positive, and having a supportive network of people that are really looking to help you achieve your goals. Absolutely key. 1 or 2 more out of the box employment research strategies to refine your career goals. I think is phenomenal. We spoke about it earlier. Marjorie spoke about it. Robert spoke about it. Out of the box thinking. Again, many of you guys may be thinking all there is an architectural firm for me to go to, and I'm here on behalf to let you guys know that there are a number of options that you can get into. We know people that are doing, sneaker design and manufacturing at Nike. We know people, myself, that have done set design and production design for Spike Lee movies. I'm currently doing development and hiring architects and engineers and stuff like that for projects here. So I'd be a great resource and willing to speak to any one of you after about some non-traditional means of employment outside of architecture, but with that skill set. There's nothing better than understanding form and function. I think the way that I've been able to kind of climb that ladder of success as opposed to some of my colleagues in the industry, because many of them in development take the econ route, take the finance route. A lot of these guys or gals are numbers, kind of finance majors. I'm coming from a totally different, and this was kind of what set me apart a decade or so ago, coming from the totally traditional, different side of the brain. I have an aesthetic mind. I know what good design is, and ultimately saving clients money by just, leading them down the construction path. Last but not least, exploring internship experiences. I can't express the importance or the value of an internship. I know my first year in college, I didn't really exploit that. I got my traditional retail Gap job freshman year, and I would tell you guys that's not the best use of your time. You know what you're doing. You're at Cornell University. Get into some nitty-gritty internships. I didn't realize I didn't want to be an architect until I had an architectural internship. I did mine at SOM. I did stair details, and I couldn't believe that adults, and I'm 19, 20 at the time, and these are adults that are in their 30s, so I couldn't believe that they would spend 40 to 60 hours doing stair details. Totally crossed it off my list. I knew architecture wasn't for me. But then the next summer, I did the thing with Spike Lee, the set design, summer after that, just staying engaged and doing internships, meeting people, not willing to kind of roll up your sleeves and work from the bottom, I think is a way that you can kind of cut your teeth in the industry. And I would use some of those steps that I just suggested to kind of navigate post-COVID.
Wow. Mark, you want to jump in off of that?
Well, my first statement is I can only imagine if you were given a lobby design to do, you might be an architect today instead of stairs. But one of the as people were speaking, one of the things that just came to mind, especially when you mentioned about the school system not opening up again, man, we're qualified to teach when we first come out of university, and we're not saying about teaching as a professor. I'm saying teaching elementary, teaching junior high, teaching high school. You all know geometry. You all know spatial recognition of various things. There's so many things you could teach, and I know if I was a parent that didn't have time to be sitting down with my young people, I would be hiring somebody to teach my kids through the screen, whatever needs to be done. So I think that's a huge opportunity right there to just look at what you can do in speaking to kids and teaching young people. And so from that perspective, my firm, we are operating remotely, and really it hasn't had much of an impact on us. We've been able to get projects through, and we use Bluebeam. We do screen shares, and I can mark up drawings with the young, with my team, and be able to share with them design ideas. So really, it hasn't hurt us at all. Maybe slowed us down a little bit with not being able to meet together in a room, but for the most part, I think we've been doing pretty well with that. I can think of, because one of the part of the question had to do with a change in your skill set. And I want to share one experience, which was unexpected change in a skill set. Right around the time when the museum in DC was finishing, I didn't feel that I should stay in that firm. And I was thinking, all right, I need some time to just kind of rethink. And so I decided to pull out the Mark Hill Architect shingle and just kind of do my own work here and there, and just take time to design and enjoy myself. And in the process of doing that, I needed a contractor. And so I called up a contractor that I had worked with when I was with Gwathmey Siegel and the Jewish Children's Museum in Brooklyn. I was the senior architect for that. And this contractor that I had worked with, I mean, I gave them hell every day. I went there and I said, rip it down, redo stuff. At the end of the day, at the end of the project, the senior project manager came to me and says, if I ever see you on a job, I'm going to shoot first. That's the end of how that went. But at the same time, he said, but if I ever need a house done, I'm coming to you. So it was kind of a mixed, love-hate relationship there. And so I figured, okay, the project got done. It was done right, and it was finished. So this is 10 years later, and I'm looking for a contractor to work on some projects that I have. And I call up this guy. I said, look, I know you're too big for what I need, but I need some help in just giving me some ideas as to who might be able to do this apartment for me. And his first statement to me was, how did you end up calling me? And I said, well, what do you mean? I had your number in my book and whatever. And he says, I've been looking for you for 3 weeks. And this is 10 years later, this guy. And I said, why? He says, well, because I have this issue. I've got this building with another architect, and I need someone to interpret for me. So I came into New York City, and we started talking, and he hired me. He's a developer, so I'm not used to being on that side of the table. I'm used to being on the architect side. And he hired me as his interpreter to explain to the architect that he had on board what he needed and how to do it. So here I was working for the developer. Let me tell you, I learned so much from him as a developer. He looked at projects totally different way than an architect looked at projects, but they were valid in what he was doing, and it was brilliant. And I was able to help him with the architectural side of looking at things. So you just never know. 10 years later, I never saw that coming, but I was able to help him. He was able to help me. And for 2.5 years, I traveled from North Carolina to New York every day, every week, from Tuesday to Thursday to work on this building so that it could get done and be his right-hand person to be able to do that. So that was a whole new opportunity that I never saw coming, but it worked out really great. So there's some other ideas.
Yeah, great. Dan, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say the lesson of what Mark just said is something that whether there are good times or bad times, it's that the professional world is very small, and you'll be amazed of all the people you meet over the years. You practically, I have some very close friends now. It's like we grew up in the business together, so to speak. They're engineers and so forth, and our kids are the same age, and they're at the same age and stage. And you realize that every interaction you have is actually important, and you should always put your best foot forward. It sounds like so trite, but you always have to be present and just really excel at everything. And then 10 years later, the person will be, I got to call up Mark because he was so good, but going back to the question is like, and sort of really specifically about collaboration and in this virtual world and skill sets we're looking for and things like that. So we've gotten projects and are doing really complex design projects right now that we've gotten completely virtually, like interviewed for the job, got hired for the job. I've never met the client face to face, and we're doing, it blows my mind. And then the design teams of working with are working virtually, and it's hard for new people to plug in, but they do. And because you all have a great set of skill sets, you're much more, like, to me, it blows my mind that there's like Microsoft Teams and you can chat. For you, that's like, yeah, of course, duh. Yeah. So, but the skills of graphic representation and clarity and clearly stated conceptual thinking and sort of ability to have some, take something that someone says and, hey, I have a concept, here's the partie sketch, everybody go off and do 2 or 3 different versions of it. And, the ability to think conceptually about something and bring it to the next level is, irreplaceable, and is whether you're dealing with a small project, a big project, a set for Spike Lee, a set of working drawings, it's all the same. It's all about, critical thinking and communications. I will say that you should highlight all those skills in terms of fluency of working in the virtual world. If I were coming out of school now and applying, I would say, listen, I can do Revit, I could do, I could do Grasshopper, I can, whatever I don't even know what the programs are, but that you can create websites, you can create Instagrams, you can, short videos, interesting graphics. So you just trying to, and what DeVon said is like, how can you help the firm help themselves and that's really, so if you can say, look, here, that's the way you should be thinking about it. It's like, here's what I can do, and if you hire me, you'll be able to put the work out in a better way. That's how you're going to get hired. And so that's how we get jobs. It's like, you put yourself in the shoes of the customer and you say, what are they looking for in design? Not stylistic necessarily, but like, what is their problem that they need, that they have, and how can you solve it? So if you put that lens on, I think you'd be successful. But I really think you should stress fluency in the virtual world, because most of the people who are going to hire you are probably less fluent than you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know we're getting close to the end, but can we run a little longer? I know I feel like we just got started. If people can stay on, I think there's a number of things I'd love to build on. We have some questions that are already been submitted, but if anyone has a burning question, I think we can use the hand raising piece there. We can let you directly ask your own question of our panelists. So use the hand function, and then Marjorie will be able to pull it right up. So while you're thinking of your questions, I want to shift back over to Julia, because Julia, you've been really having a chance to do a really, really deep dive on women in architecture and design. And I can't wait to see what your first book is going to be, because I'm sure it's going to be this amazing compendium of all these amazing interviews. But you're actually tapping into such a rich source, and we have lots and lots of women here on the call. I'd love you to share a little bit more about your work and some of the really powerful stories and narratives that have come forward for you personally. We'd love to hear a little bit about their journey, because you've been with them all. I mean, it's really amazing to see the roster of people you've been able to spend time with.
Thanks so much, Bob. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead, Julia, because I think Julia needs to leave though.
Oh, okay.
I can answer abridged, and then
okay,
but also just so all the students know, Marjorie has my email, and so I'd love to touch base with whoever wants to afterwards too. Obviously a fan of talking to people one-on-one, but no, I will talk a little bit about Madam Architect, and just that it really started as I just wanted to get the advice that you guys are getting right now. This is literally like this panel. Things like this weren't really happening when I was graduating, and I was really needing that. I had no network. Again, immigrant family, like no foundations on the East Coast, no foundations in architecture. And so I was just trying to meet as many people as possible and just get guidance, just how do you navigate work situations, etc. And that's really why and how it got started. I also, again, I really like to write, and that's something that was always, not even secondary, kind of very tertiary throughout my schooling experience and throughout my work experience, and I didn't want it to be. I wanted to be a pretty big component of how I contribute to the world and to the profession. And so that kind of was a perfect way to combine both, get the guidance that I was really looking for, and then share it with everyone by writing about it. And that's how it started. But then what happened is the more people I met, I just realized, number one, there's so many people at different stages of their careers. There are those that are very established, very seasoned, and are kind of looking back at a lot and lessons learned. And there are those who are in the trenches, like women that are just starting families, just starting firms, just elevated to a leadership position, and now need to exude sort of a different presence. And so I started talking to a lot of people about that. Then it really turned into business owners and a lot of founders. I mean, we've interviewed so many founders and CEOs now, and some of which I'll be on another panel on Thursday with AAA New York. And so some of them, specifically Michelle Young of Untapped New York, is going to join for that. But I feel like Madam Architect has really grown from becoming a platform sort of for female empowerment into a platform for kind of something that combines creativity and business. And we have a couple of initiatives that we started. One is we're publishing now like analog artwork by architects that have nothing to do with buildings, and also we have a column on business strategy. And so I don't know, I almost see it growing into something like Fast Company that's like a feminist, from a feminist perspective, if you will. But having said all of this, just like the amount of stories and paths that I've heard, I would encourage everyone to read Brand Knapp's interview. That's BRANDT KNAPP, because she gets really real. She talks about visa struggles, trying to work abroad. She talks about not earning the salary that she would need to earn in New York because she was working for a architect. She talks about family planning and fertility treatments. I mean, she just gets really, really real. And I think something that's been really nice about a lot of these interviews is they are quite intimate. yeah, I would really encourage you. Now on our new website, we also have categories that kind of sort the interviews by theme. So we have architecture and activism, we have entrepreneurship on there, we have Madam Architect Abroad of some of the international kind of architects that we've spoken to. So if you haven't already, if you've just kind of been following the interviews as they get published, you know, week to week, I would encourage you to go on the website and scroll down a little bit to see all the groupings and all the different, you know, themes, and you can find a lot of guidance in that and something that you're looking for. But no, I would love to talk to anyone that wants to offline. So Marjorie sent out my email. Please email me. And unfortunately, I do have to jump off. I have another call.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julia. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Great. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you guys so much. Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
I'm sure some of you have other questions. If not, I have a couple other ones I can throw out to our guests, but I do want to give any of the students that feel like they have a burning question to put the hand up. Anyone we have out there, Marjorie?
No one so far. If someone wants just to throw out a question, go ahead.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be written.
Yeah.
We can turn your mic on and you can launch at it.
Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Yep.
I'm Utkarsha, and actually I'm not from Cornell University.
You're still welcome.
So I did my master's from Newhouse in arts journalism, and I'm an architect. I did my architecture from India, and this was actually for Julia, but she's not here right now. And I'm finding it a little difficult to get into architecture magazines. And I, like, throughout my architecture career, I realized that this is what I want to do. And yeah, so any advice that you guys have on architecture journalism?
That's a good one. Wow. Who's anybody else?
So I just had my first foray in architectural journalism. I usually every once in a while, you know, written a thought piece or something like that for Council on Tall Buildings or other things like that. But I decided during COVID that I would really try to, crystallize some thinkings I had about like the city, especially around, you know, New York and what was happening. So I wrote a piece and tried peddling it around to people, and my circumstances are different. We have like a publicist that we have on, not on retainer, that helps, you know, us get exposure, and they were trying to place it and it wasn't going anywhere, and I was really depressed, you know, because I was like, I did all this, and they were like, why don't you just put it on Medium, you know, and see what happens. And I was literally like filling out the form on Medium, and Arc News Now picked it up, and was it became like one of their highlight things, and I've gotten a lot of exposure from it. It was really gratifying. I never done anything like that. So all I would say is, it's not my total areas, but if you have something, you know, it's one of the more, it's one of those things that it's meritocracy is still, you know, unlike maybe getting design commissions, you know, where, you know, it's as much as, your network is your net worth. But with writing, it's, yes, the connections really matter, but you could so easy to get stuff out there now that I think the most important thing is having something very, very clear to say and insightful. Anyway, Arc News Now is a great platform. Kristen Richards is she used to be editor of Oculus, and she would be, you know, you should just go directly to her, and blogs, and there's a whole bunch of great things out there. So I think the important thing is to develop a body of thinking and a point of view.
Yeah. One other source that you might want to take a look at, the Architectural League of New York
Yes.
has a regular written series called the Urban Omnibus, and you can go online and see the archive of all of their writing, and they do take submissions. There's usually critical topics that they're particularly focused on, but it's worth talking with their staff that really produce the Urban Omnibus. If you want to submit, you can get my email through Marjorie. I can definitely put you in touch with the people that are really doing this, including the executive director, Rosalie Ginevro, because they do take submissions on various topics. It is quite selective, but they are a wonderful, very broadly thinking of urban design, urban planning, architecture, societal issues. So they're very, very broad, looking at everything from affordable housing to placemaking, you name it. And I'm sure you would find some real inspirations by looking at their catalog of what they've already written. Other questions? Oh my gosh, wow. Well, I'm going to throw one last one out to the group then. This is a little bit more on the realm of Cornell education. And one of the students writes, are there any opportunities you wish you had taken more advantage of while you were in school? So this is partly for some of those students that are on the call today that are still at Cornell, kind of maybe wanting to refocus. So I'm going to let our three panelists all each take a crack at that. DeVon?
Absolutely. That's probably one of my criticisms, my small criticisms of the Cornell curriculum. Unless you yourself are dedicated to getting outside of that school, you could be with your 50 to 60 colleagues for 5 years. And I honestly don't think there's anything cool about that at all. It behooves you to explore some of the other programs there. I realize that now they have a growing real estate program, if that's in your interest. I don't know. I'm so crazy. I don't know about you guys, but back in my day, we used to laugh at the hotelies. Today, you may want to go. You may want to go take a class with the hotelies. Seriously, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just me. We used to laugh at the hotelies. You guys may want to go visit the hotel school.
Yeah.
What else? What else did we do? Just really getting outside of the bubble of the traditional courses. If there's anything that I could do or say to administration there, it would be, allowing more than just, I think, one semester a year you guys get to go venture off. That's terrible. There's a big university out there. There's more than just the 50 to 60 of you. And I think that would just enrich your overall Cornell experience if you get out of Rand and Sibley or what the new buildings are now, excuse me. But, really, take some other classes and some other core courses, curriculums that interest you guys. And I think you would be well served.
Right. And a shameless plug for AAP NYC. We now have this semester in New York City where we kind of try and stretch them a little bit, as we are known to drink from the fire hose periodically. Mark?
If I had to do it over again, I would be so much more serious about my education. When I think about how there were times where I was just too tired or just didn't feel like working, I would be, after all those professors, I would just be drinking, like you said, from the fire hose of the professors and just asking a zillion questions I could ask. There's just so much knowledge in that university that you could get. And I would be way more active. I would do more foreign programs. I would just bury myself in learning more. Because when you get out and you realize that was an incredible place to have learned and that there was more opportunity to have learned and you didn't take it, you can think back over time, well, man, I got to do that on my own now. Whereas before you had a concentrated opportunity to do that. So I know when you're young people now, you don't think about it. You're just thinking, hey, I got to go to studio. I got to finish this. I got to do this assignment. Yay, I can go party. I get it. We all need to break, but man, that's an opportunity. There is so much knowledge there that you could really get, and that would really help you in your thinking to set you up. So that would be my
That's
thought.
great.
And
That's right.
there is life outside of the studio, guys. Definitely life outside of the studio. Explore it. You know, those all-nighters that they make you feel like you have to do. I mean, you got to put your time in, but, you know, use your time efficiently when you go in there. No BSing. Do what you need to do. But you don't need to, you know, commit yourself to the studio the way they make, you know, they brainwash you to believe.
Dan, any thoughts? I know 84 is a great year. You guys probably reflected on this a lot.
Yeah, well, it was, you know, we did have the benefit of, like, the one thing I would say is the 50 or 60 people that I spent like 99% of my time actually turned out to be wonderful people and are still friends. So that's I mean, there's point. I would say a couple things. One,
20,000 person university.
I know.
You met 50, 60 people.
Just got lucky. But two things. One is, and I'm sure your parents have probably told you this, but I do think it's super important to gain financial literacy and take an accounting course and understand what depreciation is and everything like that. Just, you have to, it's sort of like you are, you know, going into a world of clients and you have to just know their language. It's not like, you know, it's simple as that, you know. So I think it's understanding, and it's all, to me, like, you know, math, economics, 3D design. It's all, if you picture all this stuff as like 3D flows, you know, it all makes sense. All the things that you've learned are just completely helpful. And the other thing I would say is everything is interrelated. I mean, I read history a lot, and I'm a real fan of economic history. And I think I remember, you know, taking architectural history. I love architectural history, and dismissing the, you know, it was always about the stylistic or the architectural aspects that were like, I was so focused on. And, you know, when you think about Palladio's villas or anything like that, it's so much about economics, power, agriculture, like what was going on, flood control, you know, and it's such a deeper reading of the context of things, and in addition to the formal aspects and how they're all interrelated. So, you know, as I say, everything is interrelated, and if you can't get your fill at the fire hose when you're at Cornell, just remember that, you know, you've really learned how to learn. And when you just got to keep doing it when you're out, and it becomes part of the obligation of, you know, just reading a lot and learning a lot and going to a lot of lectures.
Yeah. Well, if I can persuade everyone to stay for just one more last question. You know, Dean Meejan Yoon has been talking a lot about using our skills and our gifts to apply them to the great world's problems. And of course, that deals with everything from issues today of an economy that's failing, but also issues of racism, also thinking about climate change and our personal actions and investments in the future. And this one student writes, and this is kind of a big one, that's why I'm closing out, how can I use my education to make a difference in the world? And I think all of us have touched on various aspects, but let me ask each of you just to reflect on this and give me your thoughts. How can I use my education, my Cornell education, to make a difference in the world? And there's certainly no shortage of problems to be worked on. It's not like we're knocking them out of the ballpark here. We got a lot of work to do.
Well, if I can start with that one, maybe. You know, having an education at Cornell puts you at a different level just to start with in society, because you're part of an Ivy League school, which puts already you in a place where people will take notice and listen. So with that platform, I believe that people should use their voice. You know, we talk about in this society, one of the reasons that's making such a difference right now with the movements that you see throughout on television, on the media, is that people are finally putting their voices together. The voice that you're hearing now is a voice that's been going on for a while, but people weren't paying attention to that voice. But when the different cultures and nationalities got together in unison and they started to speak together as one, then people are paying attention. So how do you make a difference in this world? Is you use your voice, but you use your voice in unity with others to make a difference, because numbers is what makes the difference. The Congress and nobody would be doing anything right now about the movement that we're seeing if it wasn't the amount of numbers. Because what they see in the numbers is they see votes. They see that they could get out of office. They're not doing this out of the kindness of their heart. They're doing this because they realize that their careers are on the line. When you see the football industry changing their tune, when you see the NASCAR industry changing their tune, they're not doing it because they want to do it. They're doing it because they have no choice to do it. Because there's so much of a voice, and outcry has reached a level of deafening. And that's the reason they're doing it. And then you have the people who really do feel it and were silent for a long time, and now they feel, okay, wait a minute, I've been silent for a while and other people are speaking out. I want to join that. So I want to be part of that. So those are people who really were good people all along, but they just kind of followed the status quo. They kind of followed because nobody was speaking up. Now the people are speaking up, then they can say, wait a minute, I can join that. So use your voice.
Yeah. DeVon or Dan, either of you want any closing thoughts on that one?
No, that's a great question. One that's very difficult to answer, but I certainly echo some of those sentiments that Mark mentioned. I would say having a Cornell degree, it is assumed that you have a higher, I guess, kind of social responsibility. You know, you probably yourself feel entitled to make a difference. You want to make a difference. You know that you're sort of cream of the crop, and we should feel impacted to make such a difference. Obviously our individual experiences and the things that we will encounter in life may vary. But I have personally been very proud of my Cornell experience. Very, very much so. I'm a big advocate of my undergraduate studies, more so than my graduate, but my undergraduate has been fantastic. And I will say, diversifying yourself even at school, your relationships, your friendships, it can start from now. Who you normally sit with or eat with or room with, switching that up and experiencing new cultures and identifying new people, new interests. There is no better time to do it, I will tell you right now, than in college. People are more understanding there than they will be as soon as you get out of there. I'll tell you that. So, take advantage of the people that you're meeting, the friends, the colleagues, the camaraderie, your professors. I still very much keep it. And Marjorie could tell you, I was there probably about a year and a half ago with my family. And, there was at least 5 professors who knew me on a first-hand name basis. Likewise, I still keep in touch with these guys. I would, like to see the numbers, and we spoke about this kind of offline, some of the numbers increase in terms of the diversity. I don't think that there has been much of a difference from now than maybe the 15 years or so that I was there, but I don't fully blame the universities, and certainly not Cornell. I think myself as an African-American male, my family, Afro-Latinos, there needs to just be more awareness about architecture. I'll be honest with you, young Black men don't even know about architecture, so they're not going to college for that. You know what I mean? And it's as simple as that. Again, I'm from the Bronx. I'm from these urban areas. And if these guys knew that, there was just opportunities to do this, that you don't typically have to go the doctor or lawyer route or financer route, that you could be creative, you could use your brain, you could design. I think it starts there. So, I'm here. I'm willing to help at the high school level, the college level. Marjorie, Robert, Mark, all you guys, Daniel, feel free to use me as a resource going forward. I love speaking with the youth. I think I have a different perspective, and one that I think this generation, you guys are not sleeping yet. I think you guys are listening. I think there's a connection there. I'm not too far removed from you guys. I understand some of the challenges that you are going through. I was, kind of, when I was coming out of school, kind of in a bit of a downturn in the market myself. So I know exactly what you guys face. Just, remain vigilant, remain headstrong. You guys already have a step above. You go to Cornell University, be proud of that, wear that flag. As Daniel mentioned, Mark mentioned, it can take you a lot of places. It'll definitely put your foot in the door. What you do after that is on you, though.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Dan, any closing thoughts on that one?
Wow, I'm ready to get there. Thank you. So I'm looking at my phone. So I was just, as I said before, that I was on the regional plan. I'm on the Regional Plan Association New York committee, and basically it's a lobbying organization, and they're all focused on the economic, making proposals for the economic recovery post-COVID. And so this is what they're saying, is probably going to be the centerpiece of a federal response to New York City area to help jobs and to create a more durable recovery. Fund the MTA capital plan, which is something like, I don't know, $10 billion. That'll create 350,000 jobs. The Port Authority 10-year plan, 220,000 jobs. New York City's capital plan, libraries, rec centers, office buildings for parks, that will create 450,000 jobs. This is a big one, and I'm very interested in the next one. Improving NYCHA's physical plant, New York City Housing Authority. 650,000 people live in NYCHA. That's more than live in Wyoming. And those buildings are average age more than 50 years old, and they need $30 billion of work. That will create jobs for 220,000 people. And finally, the New Jersey Transit capital plan, about 100,000 jobs. So my point is that the federal government is, whether it's this administration or the next administration or this after November or before November, it doesn't really matter. It's going to happen one way or another, whether it happens gracefully or not, it really doesn't matter. That there is going to be a flow of public money to New York City or any major city. And I think this will happen anywhere around the world. I think it's going to happen in Korea. It's going to happen in Japan. It's going to happen in Asia. It's going to happen in Europe. And because everybody's in the same boat. And the smarter governments are going to be investing in infrastructure and all the things that'll make our cities better. And there are no better people to work on that than people who have been trained with the urban architectural outlook that Cornell is a centerpiece of. So I feel like I said in the beginning, you're graduating at a very, very difficult time, but my midterm outlook is very optimistic. I think if we can get over the next months, there's going to be really interesting, very, very impactful work that you all could be very much involved in and should be involved in. So I really thank you for your time. Don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you all. This has been such an extraordinary evening, and we'll bring it to a close. I know originally we thought we would need 90 minutes, and we definitely need 90 minutes. So
we had no idea.
yeah. But Dan, thank you for those fabulous closing. I'm so pleased that we could end on a particularly high note, especially given some of the things that we're hearing. Everyone, please stay safe, keep your spirits high. We've got a lot of work to do, but it sounds like help's on the way. And Dan, thank you so much for that news. I hadn't heard that from our colleagues at the RPA. They're right around the corner from where I'm at right now, but obviously they're not there. But we want to make sure that we stay in touch. Marjorie and I will announce the next session. You know, and fairly soon we'll have those dates so that we can kind of carry on and expand the conversation. And I want to thank our extraordinary guests, obviously Julia, DeVon, Mark, and Dan. Your contributions this evening have really been exceptional in all ways, and really appreciate all the support for Cornell. And last motto, I used to work at Gensler, and a colleague of mine, Patrick, he was a very classic Irishman with lots and lots of quotes. And he was always thinking of riffing on various quotes that other people. So his retort to the one about our friend coming 90% or 99% of life is showing up, his motto was, show up early, good things will happen. So for those that go to an interview, or any of you going out to do something, go early, go prepared, good things will happen. So I wish you all a good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.